The princess stared out from the storybook with downcast eyes, her painted face a portrait of melancholy that seemed to transcend the glossy page. 6-year-old Lily's finger hovered over the illustration, her brow furrowed with concern as she looked up at her father. "Why does the princess look sad, Daddy?" she asked, her innocent question piercing straight through to his heart. What James Morgan did next would not only transform his daughter's understanding of the world but would ultimately heal wounds he'd carried silently since becoming a widower 3 years ago. If you've ever felt the weight of a child's question that seems deceptively simple yet cuts to the core of life's deepest truths, this story is for you. Stay with us until the end to discover how one father's creative response to his daughter's curiosity sparked a journey that would touch thousands of lives. If this resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that celebrate the extraordinary moments in ordinary lives. James closed the storybook, setting it aside on Lily's colorful bedspread. The evening ritual of bedtime stories had become sacred to him since Emma's passing, a time when he could be fully present with their daughter, continuing the tradition his wife had cherished. But tonight's question lingered in the air between them, demanding more than a simple answer. "Sometimes, sweetheart," he began, choosing his words carefully, "princesses look sad because they're missing something important in their lives. Just like real people do." Lily's eyes, so much like her mother's, widened with understanding beyond her years. "Like how I miss Mommy sometimes?" James swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in his throat. "Yes, exactly like that." "Does the princess miss her mommy too?" The question hung in the air, innocent yet profound. James had always tried to be honest with Lily about her mother's death, explaining it in terms she could understand without burdening her with adult grief. But in this moment, looking at the sad princess in the storybook, he saw an opportunity. "You know what? The story doesn't tell us why she's sad. But maybe we could make up our own story about her, find out what she's missing and help her feel better. Would you like that?" Lily nodded eagerly, her sadness transforming into excitement. "Can we make her happy again, Daddy?" "We can certainly try," James promised, not realizing that this simple response to his daughter's question would become the catalyst for something much bigger than either of them could imagine. The next day, after dropping Lily at school, James found himself sitting in his car, staring at the blank notes app on his phone. He'd promised Lily they would continue their princess story that evening, but something was stirring inside him, a creative impulse he hadn't felt since before Emma's diagnosis. Before grief had hollowed him out, leaving him focused solely on survival and providing stability for Lily. He began typing, just a few sentences at first, about a princess named Lily who lived in a beautiful castle but carried a sadness in her heart because she missed her mother, the queen, who had gone to live among the stars. The words flowed more easily than he expected, and by the time he needed to head to his job at the architectural firm, he had written several paragraphs. That evening, instead of reading from one of Lily's books, James shared the beginning of their new story. Lily listened, transfixed, as he described Princess Lily and her father, the king, who didn't know how to help his daughter find happiness again. "What happens next, Daddy?" she asked when he paused. "I'm not sure yet," James admitted. "What do you think should happen?" Lily thought for a moment, her face scrunched in concentration. "I think the princess should go on an adventure to find happiness." "That's a wonderful idea," James said, genuinely impressed. "And who should go with her on this adventure?" "The king, of course," Lily declared. "They should go together." Over the next several weeks, James and Lily collaborated on their story each night. James would write during his lunch breaks or late at night after Lily was asleep, incorporating her ideas and suggestions. The tale grew into an epic journey where Princess Lily and King James traveled through enchanted forests, crossed stormy seas, and climbed misty mountains, meeting magical creatures and overcoming obstacles together. In each place they visited, they collected something special, not treasures of gold or jewels, but memories, lessons, and connections with others who had also experienced loss. A wise old turtle who taught them about carrying grief like a shell, not as a burden but as protection for their tender hearts. A flock of birds who showed them how to find joy in flight even after one of their own had fallen. A garden of flowers that bloomed most beautifully where tears had fallen. As the story developed, James noticed changes in both Lily and himself. His daughter began talking more openly about her mother, asking questions and sharing memories without the same heaviness that had accompanied these conversations before. And James found himself processing his own grief in new ways, articulating through fantasy what he had struggled to express in reality. One evening, after they had added another chapter to Princess Lily's journey, his daughter looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy, I think other kids would like our story too. Kids who are sad like the princess was." The thought had never occurred to James. Their story had been a private thing, a healing ritual between father and daughter. But looking at Lily's earnest expression, he couldn't dismiss the idea. "You might be right," he said slowly. "But how would we share it with other kids?" "You could make it into a real book," Lily suggested. "With pictures and everything." James laughed softly. "That's a big project, sweetheart." "But you're good at big projects," Lily insisted. "You build big buildings at work." Her simple faith in him was humbling. "I design them on paper," he corrected gently. "I don't actually build them myself." "So design our book on paper," Lily said with the irrefutable logic of a child. "Then someone else can help build it." The idea took root in James's mind. He had always enjoyed drawing and had studied art before switching to architecture. Perhaps he could illustrate their story himself. It would be a labor of love, something to honor Emma's memory and the journey he and Lily had taken together through grief. Over the next several months, James devoted his evenings to the project after Lily went to bed. He refined their story, smoothing out the narrative while carefully preserving Lily's contributions and the emotional truth at its core. He sketched illustrations, teaching himself digital art techniques through online tutorials when his traditional skills weren't sufficient. The process was therapeutic in ways he hadn't anticipated. Each drawing of Princess Lily became a celebration of his daughter's resilience. Each depiction of the king reflected his own growth as a parent navigating loss. And in the background of many scenes, he included subtle references to the queen, a star that shone brighter than the others, a butterfly that followed their journey, a familiar smile glimpsed in a reflection. When the manuscript was finally complete, James researched self-publishing options. The costs were significant, but he had been saving for Lily's future, and he couldn't think of a better investment than this tangible symbol of their healing. He ordered a small print run, expecting to give copies to family, friends, and perhaps donate some to the grief support group they had attended after Emma's death. What he didn't expect was the response when he shared a few images from the book on social media. Friends shared his post, which was then shared by their friends, and suddenly James was receiving messages from strangers, parents who had lost spouses, children who had lost parents, therapists who worked with grieving families. All wanted to know how they could get a copy of The Princess's Journey. A local bookstore offered to host a reading. James was terrified at the prospect of sharing something so personal in public, but Lily was excited. "We can help other sad princesses and kings," she said, and James couldn't argue with that. The day of the reading arrived, and James was stunned to find the bookstore packed. Families with children of all ages filled the chairs, spilled into the aisles, and stood against the walls. With Lily beside him, proudly wearing a paper crown she had made for the occasion, James began to read their story aloud. He watched as parents pulled children closer, as tissues were quietly passed around, as heads nodded in recognition of emotions they had experienced themselves. When he finished reading, the silence held for a moment before erupting into applause. Lily beamed up at him, and in that moment, James felt Emma's presence more strongly than he had since her death, not as an absence to be mourned, but as a love that continued to shape their lives. After the reading, people lined up to speak with them. A father with twin boys thanked James with tears in his eyes. "We lost their mother last year," he said quietly. "This is the first time they've wanted to talk about it." A grandmother purchasing the book for her grandchildren explained that their father, her son, had died in an accident. They need to know it's okay to be sad, but that they can find joy again too. A children's librarian asked if James would consider doing readings at other locations. A grief counselor wanted copies for her practice. And a woman who introduced herself as an editor for a small publishing house handed him her card, suggesting they discuss a wider release. In the weeks that followed, James found himself navigating unexpected territory. The editor was interested not just in The Princess's Journey, but in the possibility of a series addressing different aspects of childhood grief and emotional resilience. The local newspaper ran a feature on their story, which was picked up by regional outlets and then a national parenting magazine. James started a simple website where he shared updates about the book and resources for grieving families. He began receiving invitations to speak at schools, libraries, and conferences. What had begun as a private conversation between father and daughter was becoming a movement, a community of people connected by loss but committed to finding paths toward healing. 6 months after the bookstore reading, James sat in a television studio, waiting to be interviewed about the phenomenon that The Princess's Journey had become. Lily sat beside him, swinging her legs and chatting with the production assistant who had brought them water. "Are you nervous, Daddy?" she asked, noticing his fidgeting hands. "A little," he admitted. "I'm not used to talking about our story with so many people watching." Lily considered this. "But our story isn't just for us anymore, is it? It belongs to all the sad princesses and kings now." James smiled at his daughter's wisdom. "When did you get so smart?" "Mom gave me smart genes," Lily said matter-of-factly, something she had heard James say before. Then she added, "And you showed me how to use them." The interview went better than James could have hoped. He spoke honestly about the night Lily had asked about the sad princess, about their collaborative storytelling process, and about how creating the book had helped them both process their grief. "The most important thing I've learned," he told the interviewer, "is that children need space to express their feelings, even the difficult ones. When Lily asked why the princess was sad, I could have given her a simple answer and moved on. But by engaging with that question, by exploring sadness together through storytelling, we found a way to honor her mother's memory while still moving forward with our lives." The segment aired the following week, and the response was overwhelming. The website crashed from too much traffic. The publisher rushed to print more copies. James's inbox filled with messages from viewers sharing their own stories of loss and healing. One email in particular caught his attention. It was from a children's television producer who wanted to discuss the possibility of adapting The Princess's Journey into an animated special. "Your story has touched so many families," the producer wrote. "We believe that bringing it to the screen could help even more children navigate difficult emotions." James forwarded the email to the editor he was now working with, adding a note, "What do you think? This seems like a big step." Her response came quickly, "It's a wonderful opportunity, but only if it feels right to you and Lily. This has always been your journey together." That evening, after dinner, James showed Lily the producer's email, explaining in terms she could understand what an animated special would mean. "They want to make our princess into a cartoon?" Lily asked, eyes wide. "Something like that," James said. "What do you think about that idea?" Lily thought for a moment. "Would other kids watch it? Kids who are sad like I was?" "I think they would." "Then we should do it," Lily decided. "But can I help? I want to make sure they get the princess right." James laughed. "I'll tell them that's our condition." The development process took nearly a year. James and Lily were consulted at every stage, from the script to the character designs to the music. The producer kept her promise, taking Lily's input seriously and incorporating many of her suggestions. The resulting 30-minute special maintained the emotional core of their original story while bringing it to life with beautiful animation and gentle humor. On the night it was scheduled to air, James invited a small group of friends to watch with them, his parents, Emma's parents, neighbors who had helped during the difficult early days after Emma's death, and a few families from their grief support group. They gathered in the living room, surrounded by snacks and tissues, ready to see their private story transformed into a public offering. As the opening credits rolled, James felt a familiar mix of emotions: pride in what he and Lily had created together, gratitude for the unexpected journey it had taken them on, and a bittersweet awareness of Emma's absence. She should have been here for this moment. She would have loved seeing their daughter's name in the credits as story consultant. The special was everything they had hoped for, faithful to their vision while adding new dimensions through animation. When it ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the room, but the tears were accompanied by smiles and hugs. Lily moved from person to person, accepting congratulations with a grace that reminded James so much of her mother. Later, after everyone had gone home and Lily was in bed, James sat alone in the quiet living room, scrolling through the flood of social media reactions to the special. Parents were sharing how they had watched with their children, how it had opened conversations about loss and grief, how it had given them language for emotions they had struggled to express. One comment in particular caught his eye: "Thank you for showing that sadness and joy can exist together, that we can carry our losses while still moving forward. My children and I needed this story." James closed his eyes, feeling the weight and wonder of what had grown from that simple bedtime question 3 years earlier. "Why does the princess look sad, Daddy?" Lily had asked, and in trying to answer her, he had found a way to honor Emma's memory, to process his own grief, and to help others navigate the complex landscape of loss. He thought about how far they had come, from those early days of raw grief when he had barely been able to function, to now, when he and Lily had created something meaningful together that was helping others. The sadness of losing Emma would always be part of their lives, but it no longer defined them. Like the princess in their story, they had learned that happiness wasn't about forgetting what they had lost, but about carrying those memories forward with love. 2 years later, James stood backstage at a children's literature festival, watching as Lily, now 11, answered questions from an audience of young readers and their parents. Their book had spawned a series, each addressing different emotional challenges children might face. The animated special had won awards and led to additional episodes. And James had left his architectural firm to write full-time, finding fulfillment in creating stories that helped families navigate difficult conversations. "My dad and I started writing because I asked him why a princess in a book looked sad," Lily was explaining to the audience. "We didn't know our story would help other people. We were just trying to help ourselves." A small hand raised in the audience. "Do you still miss your mom?" a child asked. James held his breath, ready to step in if Lily needed support. But his daughter nodded confidently. "Every day," she said. "But missing her doesn't mean I can't be happy too. That's what our books are really about, how you can feel sad about something and still find joy in your life. My mom would have wanted that for me." As applause filled the room, James felt a familiar presence beside him, not Emma herself, but the love she had left behind, which continued to guide them both. The sad princess from that long-ago storybook had led them on an unexpected journey, one that had transformed their personal grief into a gift for others. And in that transformation, they had found their own healing. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us all that even in our darkest moments, connection and creativity can light the way forward. Remember, sometimes the most powerful changes begin with the simplest questions, and the courage to seek their answers together.